What's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken and welcome back to another video. In this one I'll be showing you guys how to play one of the most powerful tanks in Paladins, Makoa. When played correctly, Makoa can be one of the hardest champions to kill, while rivaling the damages on his team for top damage and kills. So I'll be sharing some of the tips and tricks I use when playing the Ancient. I'll be going over good loadouts for Makoa, when to choose each talent, counters to Makoa and who Makoa can counter, items, and gameplay tips for using Makoa's kit in this video. So after this video, you should know just about everything there is to know about this absolute beast of a champion. So without further ado, let's get into how to play one of the best tanks in Paladins, Makoa. We'll start out with loadouts since they're the first thing you ever choose before you even get into a battle. I recommend having 4 different loadouts for Makoa, with one main loadout for using either the Leviathan, Pluck, or Davy Jones Locker talents, 2 loadouts that are very similar to the main loadout but are built around crowd control immunity and healing, and 1 loadout that is based around shielding for the half shell talent. That way, you can be prepared for any situation that will be thrown at you, and it will already make you a much better Makoa. In all of your loadouts, I recommend that you have salvage at least level 1, so that way whenever you hook someone, you always have at least 1 cannonball left to fire at them. Hooking someone without any ammo is almost always a wasted hook, so having this card makes sure that that never happens. The cards in your main loadout are really just personal choice, but the 2 cards that I find really helpful in my loadout are Ebb and Flow at max level and Untitled Grace. Ebb and Flow at max level lets you get back your shell spin instantly when you drop below 40% health, which is extremely useful for either a super hard retreat or bamboozlement on the point if retreat is not an option. This emergency shell spin has saved my life countless times, but I don't see any point in not putting it at max level, simply because once you drop below 40% health, it's crucial to get a shell spin immediately, so having the card at even level 4 causes a delay that could be your death. Untitled Grace is a really nice card to have at a mid to high level 2, since it gives you a pretty solid heal when you're using your shell shield. At level 4 it heals for a solid 40 a tick, which is almost as much as an Astral Mark from Genos, and it even works with the half shell talent, so putting down your shield gives you a strong active heal while you fight. Both of these cards are really useful in your main loadout. Nothing much needs to change for your crowd control reduction loadout. One of your filler cards should be switched to Determination and boosted all the way up to level 5, so you get 70% crowd control reduction. And then the less important cards in your loadout should be lowered to compensate, while leaving the more important cards like Untitled Grace at relatively where they are. For the healing loadout, which you only want to use when you don't have a healer on your team, you want to crank Untitled Grace and Spring Tide up to max level, so you can squeeze the maximum amount of healing out of your shell shield and heal for 1,250 health each time you hit an enemy with your shell spin. While this certainly isn't the strongest loadout for Makoa, it really helps when you get a team full of selfish players that don't want to play a healer for whatever reason. Finally, the half shell loadout should utilize Barrier Reef and Ancient Resolve at some pretty high levels. That way, you can have your shield up more often because its cooldown will be shortened based off of how much damage it absorbs, and it stays up longer so it can absorb more damage, which in effect lowers the cooldown. Untitled Grace is a great card here, even more so than the other loadouts, because it will still provide you with a heal with the half shell talent, so you can heal up while you're fighting other tanks on point, instead of just healing while you're on your belly holding up a shield for your team. Makoa has 3 very strong and popular talents, Leviathan, Pluck, and Half Shell, and 1 talent, Davy Jones Locker, that can be extremely strong if you're playing on a smart team that knows to absolutely annihilate anyone you hook into their doom, but otherwise is probably the weakest of the 4. It could be a viable alternative to Pluck if you're in a large party of good players, but otherwise I wouldn't find myself picking that one too much. Leviathan and Pluck are 2 very general talents that can be used almost anywhere, but there are some cases where you would want one over the other. If you're a solo tank, the enemy team has a Pip or Bomb King that can make your ult useless with their crowd control, or you have a Genos on your team with a Celestial Touch talent, Leviathan is definitely the way to go. However, if you have another tank on your team, or you don't trust the damage on your team to provide sufficient damage, then Pluck would be the stronger talent. Half Shell is generally a good talent if you don't know what talent to choose. I prefer this talent if there's a lot of high ground, or the enemy team has champions that could easily make high ground for themselves like Willow or Drogos, and the enemy team also has an annoying tank or 2 that you can't afford to use your shield normally with. By picking Half Shell in a situation like this, you can completely negate incoming damage from any direction, since his shell shield is spherical, while at the same time still being able to deal with the enemy tank. This talent is heavily countered by Wrecker though, so only pick this one if Leviathan or Pluck both don't completely fit your situation. Makoa is a rather straightforward champion when it comes to gameplay, with positioning and target prioritization being the most important things to consider when playing Makoa. His hook is definitely the most difficult aspect of his kit to master, since its range can be difficult to get used to, and he throws his hook with his left hand, so it can be slightly more difficult to aim. Since it comes from his left hand, avoid trying to jiggle peek on the right side of a wall, because throwing the hook has a pretty high chance of simply bouncing off the wall, and that's a hook wasted. There are also a few techniques you can use to improve how effective your hook is. Once you've confirmed a hook on somebody, turn to your left or right to try and drag them to your side and put the enemy between you and your team. While this may seem utterly pointless at first, it makes it much more difficult for your target to escape, because they have to cross you or find some alternate route to escape instead of simply walking backwards if you hook them right to your front. You can bring them even farther out of position by turning to the side with your hook, so you and your team can have a greater opportunity to shoot at them. You can also use this technique right on a ledge to send someone plummeting to their doom. While you don't want to just sit around the whole match waiting for someone to make the mistake of coming to the edge, if you can pull it off mid-fight, it is extremely satisfying and absolutely ruins the enemy's day. His normal projectiles can be pretty difficult to use at even a medium distance, but there's nothing you can really do about that except practice, and know that the farther away your target is, the higher your reticle needs to go in order to hit them, because Makoa's shots fall quite a bit after you shoot them. As far as positioning goes, Makoa should be treated as an aggressive tank like Fernando. He doesn't try to simply defend the point and punish anyone who steps on it like a Nara or Barrack, and he isn't a passive tank like Ruckus who sits back, kills people, and then goes to the point. Makoa needs to get in the enemy's faces, so going to the left and right flanks and pushing up slightly past the point once you've got a strong foothold on it are really effective strategies to use with Makoa. Now of course, Makoa isn't a flank champion, so you don't want to be flanking all the time, but he is capable of doing so if necessary. What I find really effective with Makoa is to go to one of the sides of the map, take out a champion or two, go to the point and finish off the tank, and then push slightly ahead and zone people out while the support sits on point. You have to be super careful when pushing forward with Makoa though, because while he is an absolute unit with a gargantuan health pool and strong weapon, if you go past the range of your healer and the enemy's coming back from spawn gang up on you, you're dead just like any other champion. The point of zoning out is not to base camp, but to keep the enemies from getting to the objective by taking the fight to their side of the map, and Makoa excels at this tactic. Target prioritization is also something crucial to consider when playing Makoa. Makoa does not shred tanks like Drogoz or Tyra, so he doesn't need to be focusing them down with his shots all the time. While he can be on point and pose a threat to the enemy tank, if there's an unlucky healer or a squishy champion who's also near the objective, you need to be fighting them and not the tank unless the enemy tank just absolutely won't let you attack their teammates, or the tank is at half health and you can finish them off just like you would a normal champion. Makoa can easily finish off most squishy champions at full health in 4 shots, and you get a free one off when you hook one of them onto the objective where you are. So his main targets should be healers and flanks, which an accurate Makoa can be an absolute nightmare for. Of course, Makoa can still be really annoying to deal with as a tank, so going after the tank can still be a good choice. But if you choose to attack the tank first instead of someone else, the tank will have their support and the other teammates backing them up, whereas they wouldn't if you took out their healer or somebody else first. Once again, you're not a flank champion, so only going after enemy supports and damages is not what you want to do. But if one of those champions wanders too close to the objective, go after them first. For his ult, you really only want to go after squishy champions, since it can completely mess them up and get you an easy multi-kill. However, his ult is primarily for denying anyone from getting on the point, so if you're in a sticky situation when you're capping or pushing, you should use it and give your team a huge opportunity to push. You never want to ult the enemy team when you don't have your team to support you though, since you could easily find 4 or 5 crosshairs pointed your way, and even with 10,000 health, you can still be killed in a few seconds. You also don't want to use his ult at the end of a round unless it's absolutely crucial that you use it to push the payload through or keep the payload from being pushed. If you don't have your ult for the point fight, most of the time you're putting your entire team at a disadvantage when it comes to capping. You also want to try and read if Drogoz has his ult or not, since a smart Drogoz will typically try and save their ult for when you ult. So try and pay attention, and make sure he doesn't have his ult when you pop yours, since Drogoz can challenge Makoa really easily. A lot of Makoa's items are situational, but there are a few items you generally want to stay away from when playing Makoa. Deft hands, as it is with most champions, should never be picked up by Makoa. Cauterize is usually the best choice for his weapon, but if the enemy team has an Inara running Treacherous Ground, a Barrack running a turret loadout, or a healing Grok, Bulldozer works wonders with his weapon. His cannon isn't the best for shields, but he can definitely make Wrecker work, especially if the enemy team has a Ruckus or a Torvald. Rejuvenate and surprisingly Veteran are good choices for a healing item depending on the situation. If you don't have a healer on your team or your healer is doing a poor job healing you, Veteran is a surprisingly viable option. Obviously, if you do have a competent healer, Rejuvenate is the way to go. Kill to heal is alright if you're getting a lot of eliminations that round and your healer sucks, but you should never go for Life Rip because Makoa's weapon is not a high DPS weapon like Ruckus or Victor's, and it doesn't have super powerful shots like Shaolin's or Kinesis. All of the utility items can work with Makoa depending on the situation. Master Riding works if you want to beat the enemy tank to the point and try and zone them off before they've even got a chance to get on, and it can also help if you find yourself dying a lot. Nimble is good for chasing after squishies, and Chronos or Morale Boost are good for obvious reasons. I would choose Chronos over Morale Boost most of the time since it lets you hook people more often, and you can also have your shell spin up a lot more frequently, which makes you more mobile. Obviously, for the fence, you want to counter what's annoying you the most, but if you're using your crowd control reduction loadout, don't pick up Resilience since you've already got nearly max level Resilience built into your loadout. For those of you who play ranks a lot, there are a few champions that can counter Makoa and make other tanks a better option. Drogos can obviously ruin Makoa's ult and make Fernando or Khan a better option, because Fernando's ult is a direct counter to Drogos' ult, and Khan's Battle Shout can buy him a second of immortality for Drogos to accidentally land his ult on someone else, or simply run out of time on his ult. Ashe's ult isn't a direct counter to Drogos, since she has to play through her jump animation that can be easily interrupted by a crowd control ability, or Drogo simply slamming into her mid-air, and her kit is inferior in most aspects to Makoa's, so she wouldn't be a better option to Makoa in this instance. Inara and Khan can both counter Makoa to some extent. With Inara's super high damage reduction, her Mother's Grace talent, and Treacherous Ground talent, she can be super annoying for Makoa and can make her a very difficult target to kill. Khan's Battle Shout when running Firing Line, which is the most popular talent by far, grants himself and his nearby allies CC immunity, which makes Makoa's hook absolutely useless, and his Commander's Grab can rip Makoa right out of his Shell Shield or Shell Spin, which can be the difference between life and death for the Ancient or one of his teammates. Makoa can easily counter quite a few champions himself though. Androxus and Terminus both have very strong damage denial abilities in their Reversal and Power Siphon, but Makoa's hook can cut right through both of them and cancel the ability, which can be a lethal move for either of them at times when they need to retreat and would otherwise be allowed to do so. Makoa's hook also doesn't get blocked by Torvald or Ruckus' shields, so dragging them in with his hook and pummeling them with cannonballs is super easy. His hook has the added bonus of dragging Ruckus way out of position, which can absolutely devastate the worst of friends, since positioning with him is absolutely crucial. Ruckus struggles greatly in a straight close quarters fight with Makoa, who has a bigger shield, larger health pool, and his hook which dragged Ruckus into a bad position in the first place. Makoa is an easy direct counter to Ruckus, and he also counters any champion with low mobility because of his hook once again. Champions like Tyra, Victor, Vivian, and Skye are almost guaranteed to die if you hook them into you, because they have no way of escaping, or at least not very easily. If you're not about to die when you hook them, you can easily land 2 or 3 shots if you're accurate, and finish them off in a second or two if your team pays any sort of attention and sends a few bullets their way. Makoa counters a ton of champions, and there isn't really a situation where he would be a terrible pick, but he does struggle more against champions like Inara and Drogos than he does versus others. So that's the end of this video. Do these tips and tricks help you become a better Makoa? If so, be sure to leave a like and comment down below who you'd like to see a tutorial on next. Also, be sure to subscribe for more champion tutorials, top 5s, and gameplay from me, and join my Discord using the code in the description to leave suggestions, pick up tips, or just hang out. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.